Hello, I'm Freya from Crafty Sew&So, and I'm sharing with you today a tutorial to make some really cute and quick to make fabric coasters. The fabric coasters will look a little like this, and you can make a set of 4 really quickly, which makes a fantastic gift. These coasters are also fantastic scrap busters because they take very little fabric each one, and if you've got lots of different scraps, you can mix and match on the different sides for a really fun effect. To make the coasters, you're going to need scraps of fabric at least 10 centimeters square and scraps of wadding. You can use heat-proof wadding or regular wadding, whatever you have to hand. If you enjoyed today's workshop, do check out our website for more patterns and tutorials. We're at craftysew&so.com and we have a range of patterns to suit everybody. Okay, to start making our coasters, we're going to want to start by cutting out our fabric. So I've taken my fabric here, it's 100% cotton, and I'm going to lay my template down on top of it. So this template is one that you can print out, that's been included with this class, but you can also just make your own. It's a 4-inch square, and so it's a really easy one to just draft up very quickly at home. If you've got a quilting ruler, it's even easier. So I put my template on my fabric, I put a pin in each corner. Because it's only a small project, I don't need a load of pins. 4 pins, 1 in each corner, is enough to hold the template to the fabric and get the job done. Then I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to just cut out the 4 sides of the square. You can see I've put it near the edge of the fabric, to make sure I'm minimizing my waste. These templates are nice and small, so you can use scraps of fabric to make lots of lovely coasters, and it's a really nice scrap buster fabric project. Once you've cut all your fabric out, so you can do more than 1 coaster's worth at a time, so each pair of fabric is going to make 1 coaster. You might as well make a few at a time and cut out more than 1. Once we've cut out the squares of fabric that we're going to be using, we're going to take our template and we're going to put the fabric aside. Then we're going to grab our wadding and put our template on our wadding and do exactly the same. We're going to cut out 2 squares of wadding for each coaster. The wadding I'm using here is a 80-20 cotton poly blend, which has a low loft, so it's quite dense. You can also use a heat-proof wadding like a thermolam, and that will give your coasters extra protection for very hot drinks. But with 2 layers of a wadding like this one, which is a cotton poly blend, you should have enough protection that you don't need that unless you're really like your drinks scalding hot. So 2 layers of the cotton, we can cut it out at the same time in exactly the same way as we would our fabric. And again, if you've got scraps of wadding left over from quilting projects, this is a great way to use them up and minimize your sewing waste. Once I've done all 4 sides, we're going to layer up our fabric with our wadding to get the coasters together and start sewing them together. So take out your pins, pop them in your pin cushion, and pop the template aside for later, because you might want to do this project again and again, you never know. Take your wadding and then lay your 1 piece of your fabric right sides up, so that's the printed side of your fabric facing up so you can see it on top of the 2 layers of wadding. Then take your other piece of fabric and put that right sides down, so the 2 right sides or printed sides of your fabric are together on top of your wadding like so. Then we're going to pin all 4 layers together, and again we're going to use just a pin in each corner to hold it together. This is a small project, you don't really want to use lots of pins, otherwise you're going to spend forever removing your pins as you're sewing around the outside. In goes my 3rd pin, and there's my 4th, but we are going to put 2 more pins in along this edge. So these 2 pins are going to show us where to start and stop sewing. So this one wants to go in about 2 or 3 fingers width from the edge of the fabric, and the other one at an equal distance from the bottom edge of the fabric. I'm putting these pins in like so it's different, they look different to the other pins we're putting in, so this gap is where we're not going to be sewing. Now we're very simply going to be sewing all the way around the outside apart from that gap which we've left open and marked with the pins. So we're going to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And for me on my machine, that means my machine needle is over to the left, but you will need to check that with your own machine. We're going to sew up to the corner, pivot, and then sew along the next edge all the way along to the next corner and pivot again. I am really sorry for the shaky camera work here. I hadn't realised the camera was shaking so much when I was recording this, but I hope you can still see that I'm just sewing a nice straight line all the way around, the 3 edges and a little bit in on that 4th edge that we're leaving open. Don't forget to backstitch at the opening so that we can turn it out in a minute. So now we're going to remove all 6 pins, and we're getting ready to turn our coaster out. So you can see where we've left a gap to turn out here, and of course you want to make sure that's between the printed fabrics and not the wadding. But before we do that, we need to trim the corners. So we're going to trim these corners, and we're just going to cut off a nice straight line off each of the corners like so, so cutting off the triangle. Make sure you're a few millimeters away from the stitching so you're not accidentally cutting through the stitching. We do this to reduce the bulk so that there's less corner stuffing, so it doesn't feel so poofy and there's not so much there when we turn it through. For the same reason, we reduce the wadding and the bulk by trimming off half the seam allowance on 3 sides of your square. So that's the 3 sides apart from the one that's got the opening. And I just trim off half of the seam allowance, so if your seam allowance is a bit smaller or bigger than mine, just half of whatever you've got there, and that'll help the coaster lay flat later. So pop all those bits in your bin, and now we're ready to turn it through. So I'm opening up between the layers of fabric, and I'm just gently pulling, easing it through. We want to be very gentle with our fabric and not rip the stitches. And then we're going to push all those corners out so that everything is lying where we want it to. These corners can be a bit fiddly. You want to get them nice and sharp, nice and clear. Sometimes your finger's enough and you can just kind of wiggle and ease those corners into place. I'm going to have a go at that now and see how far I can get, and then I can have a look and see if any further intervention is needed. Don't forget to do all 4 of the corners, of course. There's more than one to do, and you'll need to do this for every single one of your coasters that you make. So this is only getting me so far, so I think I am going to grab a tool. So you can use like a blunt knitting needle, but these corners are just too round, so I'm going to grab my special prim tool, which I really love. It's a corner shaper. It looks like this, so this is what I'm using, and it's got a lovely gentle edge, so you can push through your fabric and poke out those corners to a really clear, clean, sharp edge that looks really smart. Once I've done all 4 of the corners, then I'm really happy with those, and we can then go and close the opening for where we've turned the coaster out. There we go. You want to be really gentle with this. So once we've got that, we're going to close this gap. So this is why we've left a nice big seam allowance, so we can push the seam allowance in, and then we're going to pin that closed for now before we sew it, and just make it nice and even so that we can keep it looking very square. So pop your pin in through the seam allowance nearish the edge to do that. There you go, nicely closed, and we'll go take that to the sewing machine to sew. So this time we've moved the needle over to the right hand side, and we're going to use the edge of the machine foot to create our seam allowance. So this is so that we can have a nice small seam allowance, and as we go around the coaster we're going to use that same distance, which is about 4 or 5 millimeters, to create the spiral effect. There we go. So now that first row of stitching is along the side of the opening, so that's closed that opening nicely. And then as we get to the corner, we can leave the needle in and pivot round and sew the next side again. So we're just going to keep repeating this until that 4th side, where we're not going to sew all the way up to the line of stitching. We're going to start about 5 millimeters away from that original line of stitching, and pivot in. So we're creating a little spiral effect, so the next line of stitching lines up 5mm away from that first. To keep this nice and even, use the side of your machine foot against the last line of stitching that you did, and as you go around, that will keep each loop of the spiral really even and the same distance away from the last line of stitching that you did on all of the sides. Now you're just going to want to keep doing this round and round and round until you get to the center. So I'm going to speed up my video. And this is at double speed, and so you can see it's very simple, round and round and round. Of course, this is a really lovely project to have a go at different quilting techniques. So if you wanted to have a go at something different, or you've got another design in mind, maybe a crisscross design or even free motion, have a go. This is your chance to have a go at that and enjoy trying something new. Now I'm almost at the centre, so I'm just going to keep going until I'm all the way in the middle, and then I'm going to close up my box so that the spiral meets itself in the very middle. I really like this design because it's very quick to do, and you can make coasters up quite quickly for gifts and presents without worrying about getting straight lines, because you know the following the foot will get you what you want. So here we are in the middle. I'm just going to do a little back stitch to secure those threads, and then I'm going to take the coaster off the machine and trim my threads really short. So obviously I want my threads to be as close to my fabric as possible, and because I've back stitched I can just trim them straight off there. They're not going to come undone. There we go. Here is my finished coaster. So I really like these. I've made a set of 4 to give as a gift, and they are perfect for both your cup of tea and your snack. Thank you so much for watching my video today, and I hope you enjoy making your own coasters. Please remember to share your coasters with us on our Facebook group, the Crafty Sew&Sos, or on Instagram using hashtag Crafty Sew&So. I can't wait to see yours. Thank you so much, and happy sewing. Goodbye.